instead of starting off every piece of content by thinking about what platform you're putting it on, think about what story you're telling. Think about what you're trying to communicate and what you're trying to get out there. I think that's one of the critical things. And that's what really changes just content, because we all put out a lot of content every day, changes it into content marketing.
Welcome to Content Kingdom. This is your backstage pass to the people, tools, and the trends shaping the future of content marketing.
And welcome to another episode of Content Kingdom. This is season 2, and I am your host, David G. Ewing. And with me is Brian Piper. Brian, it is so great to have you on the show, man.
Well, I appreciate you having me here, David.
So one of my favorite things is I had no idea who you were, and we're at Content Marketing World and there's like a buffet line. I grab some food and sit down, and you're just the guy sitting next to me at the table. And I was just randomly sitting there. We struck up a conversation about, skydiving and scuba diving and basically any kind of diving, and became buddies. And then I find out, oh, you're the guy who wrote the second edition of Epic Content Marketing. That's awesome. And and learned all kinds of amazing things about you, which goes to show you that going to conferences is a really great opportunity to meet some epic people, not just epic content. So great. So Brian, you're the author of the second edition of this book. You know everybody in the content marketing world. Super excited to have you on Content Kingdom. And so, let's talk a little bit about how you got here, man. So I'd love to know just a little bit about, when did you, how, like, I got so many questions. How did you get into being the co-writer of the second edition of Epic Content Marketing with Joe?
So, I came out of college as a creative writing major and a philosophy minor. So ready to wait tables for a living. And, my dad, luckily for me, had a business doing e-learning, back in 1996 when I got out of college.
Wow.
So I started working for him. He had a lot of really good web developers working on his team. So I was trying to learn from them on the job. And I started out as a web developer, but my skills were not great. I was not super talented. It wasn't something I was passionate about. So they kept putting me on the content side of things, start figuring out how we can get listed on these different search engines that are springing up. So I started doing SEO back in 96. And then in 2015, I worked through several different companies and organizations. And then in 2015, I read the first edition of Epic Content Marketing that Joe Pulizzi wrote. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. You can market to people without pushing and without being salesy, just giving away your knowledge and creating that trust with your audience. And then they, grow to respect you and eventually will start using your services. So I went right down to the head of the marketing department after I read that book. And I said, you need to hire me to be your digital marketing manager. And they said, well, we don't have a digital marketing manager. I said, well, you need to. So they hired me in. I, started doing SEO on their content, started really thinking about what the customer was looking for and helping them with their content strategy. We doubled our organic traffic in the first year. That led me into my second marketing job, which was with University of Rochester. And within the first 2 weeks that I was there, I convinced them to send me to Content Marketing World, which was Joe Pulizzi's big event. So,
and what year was that?
That was 2017.
Okay, 2017.
So
all right.
Went to the event, tracked Joe down, took a selfie with him, told him, thanked him for changing my career path and getting me out of web development and into content marketing. And so then every year after that, I would go back to the event. I would track him down. And then in 2019, I started speaking at the event and, got to get more time with Joe and got to know him better. We established a friendship and he understood the impact that book had on my career and my life. And then in 2022, I was in a Content Marketing Institute, book review club that they had, and they were reviewing Joe's second edition of Content Inc., another one of his books. And I made an offhanded comment. I was like, well, when are you going to do a second edition of Epic? Because you know what an impact that book had on me. And he just kind of offhandedly was like, hey, if you want to co-author that with me, we'll do it.
Wow.
Yeah. I know. And it was just total random comment. I
thought you had schemed for days and weeks and months to get this to happen. Just an offhand comment like that?
Completely random. And then as soon as we got out of that book review meeting, I reached right out to him and I was like, if you're serious about this, I am all over that.
What an opportunity.
He's like, well, you're going to do the majority of the work on it. And, and really we did do a lot of the work together on it, but that was, huge opportunity and really transformative and really helped launch a lot of, my career, helped launch me into my second book, which was Epic Content Marketing for Higher Ed, which is kind of the industry that I focus on the most. And it has transformed my speaking, just having that book out there. It's like the best business card ever. And then being, connecting with Joe's audience and more connections with Joe is always great. He's got a huge audience.
So, I know you've got the book behind you and I've got my copy, which I've been carrying around now for quite some time. And there's a couple of nerdy little details that I want to ask you about in here, just because they're fun, right? So, you guys do a set the stage kind of quote at the beginning of each chapter. And chapter 2, you had me at this, Brian. If I didn't think we were pals already, you used a Robert Heinlein quote at the beginning: "A generation which ignores history has no past and no future." So I love that. And so my nerdy little question, which is so detailed, is where'd that one come from, and what's your connection to Robert Heinlein?
Stranger in a Strange Land. I love the book. And that's also one of Joe's favorite books as well.
Oh, cool. I like Joe 10% more now. So.
There you go. But it's really all about, focus, being intentional, really making sure that you are staying true to your end goal, your strategy, and really, one of the things that Joe got me into was goal setting. And 4 years ago, I really started being intentional with my goals, what I was focusing on, what I was trying to accomplish. I've got them posted here on my monitor so I can look at them every day. It's made a huge impact on, my career, my personal growth, all sorts of things like that. So I think really just staying focused, being intentional is critical.
Well, can you share one of your goals with us right now?
Putting out another book this year. So working on another book. That's one of the top ones. Yeah.
Nice. So that's exciting. That's very cool. All right. So a couple of things that I think if people have not read Epic Content Marketing, there's just an incredible amount of stuff in here. I think that, you can get into the first couple chapters and you automatically, I'd say, I think some people read business books and they have good intentions. They read a couple chapters and then they kind of tap out, right? They don't make it all the way to the end. I'm guilty of doing that sometimes myself. But I would say that, you don't need to read many chapters of this book before you're like, that's already a game-changing ROI. But when you get into the meat of this, there is some really great stuff. I think the 6 principles that you guys have at the core of the book matter. And I'm just wondering if you could touch on, for someone who's in content marketing, or is a lot of people in our audience are managers or CMOs who manage content marketers. What could they get out of this book? Even if they are gonna, just try to glean some of the characteristics of it, even if they don't read it cover to cover, what could a CMO get out of this book?
Well, I think, the biggest thing is just really focusing on audience first. I mean, really thinking about what are your user problems that they're facing? What are the questions that they're asking? And then how can you put out content, put out information that's going to answer those questions and solve those problems for them? And really focusing not at all on, what it is that you want to do and what you want to sell and what products you want to push, but really thinking about customer needs and what it is, that's going to help answer those questions for them. I think that's one of the critical focuses of content marketing in general. And really thinking, instead of starting off every piece of content by thinking about what platform you're putting it on, think about what story you're telling. Think about what you're trying to communicate and what you're trying to get out there. I think that's one of the critical things. And that's what really changes, just content, because we all put out a lot of content every day, changes it into content marketing, is being very intentional about who you're talking to and what problem you're trying to solve, and then what end goal you're trying to accomplish. So tying your content to a particular audience, to a particular goal, really being, looking to fill that need. So I think that's like the first thing that you really need to be conscious of and focused on every time you're creating content is, how does this help my audience?
Got it.
And then I think the other, another big one is being consistent. You want to be consistent with your content. You want to put it out at a regular cadence. You want your audience to be anticipating the next content that you're putting out. You want them to be waiting, Monday morning for that newsletter to come out because they know it's going to be there. They expect it. They trust you to put that content out and deliver that to them. And I think, in this day and age, with all the AI content that's going on out there, I think it's critical to really have a human voice, to tell that story from a perspective that is authentic, that comes across as, expose your vulnerabilities, tell your audience what you're worried about, what you're afraid of, so that you can connect with them better. I think that's one of the things that AI doesn't do very well. And then a lot of people want to go right into selling. They want to go right into pushing. Avoid that. Don't use that language. Just think about how you're helping your audience, how you're putting your perspective out there, what your point of view is, why they should listen to you. Where does your expertise come from? What case studies are you thinking about? What are you using? It's the same thing that, river pools and spas, Marcus Sheridan. That's one of the first examples we used. That was in the original Epic. We updated that for the second edition. I mean, his pool company was failing. They were pool installers. He just went online and put every, answer to every question that he had ever gotten online. And now they're one of the largest, installers of pools. And they actually, their business grew so fast and so big that they couldn't get enough fiberglass pool inserts to keep up with their installations. So they went into manufacturing, and now they're one of the largest manufacturers of fiberglass inserts. And Marcus does keynotes all over the world on content marketing. So
this, you brought up a couple of points, and there's a few that I want to unpack. So one is, in this age that we're in, when content is exploding and there's so much of it is just fluff, I have been exploring and experimenting with the ideas of using things that are a lot more edgy than anything AI will come up with, right? So how do I use humor? How do I use controversial statements? How do I use polarizing things? Because damn well that didn't come from an AI, right? So I, on the other hand, one of our previous guests was one of the top executives that manages MasterCard's brand. And MasterCard has this opposite thing. They're like, look, we have a huge share of the country. On any polarized topic, we have both sides. And they use MasterCard. And for God's sakes, we never, ever want to take a side on any of that stuff. We want to build a big tent and bring everybody in. So at MasterCard, they do sports marketing, because it doesn't, when you're cheering for your team, if you're an Eagles fan and the guy next to you is left, right, or center, who cares? He's an Eagles fan. I'm an Eagles fan. We're Eagles fans together. We don't care, right? But when you're smaller and you do need to craft and get someone to pay attention to you in the sea of content, I am wondering, where's the line where, you use edgy humor, controversy, and you really go after it and you get more aggressive and you break a few eggs to make an omelet. And I'd be curious to know, what are your thoughts on that? Where is that appropriate? Where have you seen it done well? Have you ever been a part of something that was a disaster? What are your thoughts?
Yeah. So, my primary audience, I do a lot of B2B, B2C, but my primary audience really is higher ed. So a lot of higher ed institutions, when I say that, I was like, you need to take a stand. You need to have a viewpoint. They're like, we don't want to, play. I'm like, you don't have to have a viewpoint and express it on every topic, right? So be judicial about where you're going to take a stand and where you're going to have a viewpoint, but you do have opinions. You do think about things. So express what your brand concern should be around that, or make sure that your audience knows that you're empathetic to their point of view so that you understand where they're coming from on different topics or different issues. And if your brand is all about pushing the limits and exploring and experimenting, then show that in your content. I mean, like you said, MasterCard, probably not going to take a stand on very polarizing political issues. It's not their brand. Nike, on the other hand, is all about that, right? They are always looking for opportunities to endorse people who exemplify their brand and show those pushing the limits and pushing the boundaries. But they also do that from a very focused perspective about thinking about who their audience is very intentionally. Bud Light tried to take a stand and they weren't thinking about who their audience was, and it didn't work out so well for them. So you really have to have that perspective, and you have to always be thinking about your audience. You have to always be thinking about, do we have people in our audience that are polarized on both sides of this issue? Maybe this isn't an issue that we should take a stand on, but maybe it's something that we should discuss. Maybe there are other ways that we can take stands on other things that they can see that both of these groups, that all of our audiences have this problem. They're all facing this issue. These are solutions that we can help them, come together on.
So, I think that that does bring up kind of a really interesting topic. So I grew up in the state of Michigan. And so I'd heard of like Hillsdale College before, right? And in the world of higher ed, I guess that's about as close to like a polarizing thing that I can think of, is that Hillsdale markets themselves as we're a conservative, classical school. We have conservative values, and, that's definitely polarizing, right? Because it's going to, antagonize half the country, and half the country is going to find that, exciting. What I found interesting is I wasn't actually convinced that Hillsdale, was like that it was more of a marketing thing than it was like an actual, like, true blue, like, or a true red, opinion. And what was interesting is there was a really in-depth article where the president basically said as much, is that, hey, we can attract and have a brand that is unique and different. And we get a lot of outside support from people like, most schools, they're looking at their alumni, they're looking at their student body. And that's about as far as their sphere of influence goes. But Hillsdale has this, like a call to arms for a whole bunch of people that have nothing to do with the school. Right. And obviously that's polarizing, and it's edgy, and it works. So I guess, when you think about strategies in higher ed, I think it's fair to say, without expressing any political opinions, universities tend to lean left, right? So if you're like, hey, we're the left university, it's not such a unique message to say, right? So what are some unique messages that are maybe positions that maybe, whether it's not even politics, but just in other elements that a university or higher education can use to really differentiate themselves from other higher educations that are saying, we've got smart people, we've got smart professors, we've got, really cool architecture and really green lawns, and, kind of all the things that you see when you get excited about a higher ed. Like, what are some of the other things that you recommend that they do?
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the biggest problems in higher ed marketing is differentiation, because, when it comes right down to it, everyone's selling the same thing, right? They're selling knowledge transfer, which in this day and age, I mean, AI is very good at knowledge transfer. So that is going to be a huge disruptor for the higher ed industry in general. And I think, higher ed institutions are going to have to really start looking at what makes them different, what sets them apart. What is it? What are the kinds of students that they really want to attract, and how do they show them that this is the right institution for them? And I think that goes into like where they're investing their money and who they're hiring to bring in, and really looking at those programs that they're focusing on. So instead of just saying, we're the number one research university in New York State, because a lot of schools are attracting, attendees from within their state, new students from within their state. That tends to be the primary audience. You really have to get out of that mindset of just thinking about, the broad term. So really look at specific programs, look at your faculty who are really attracting those students, look at what it is about your culture, what it is about your campus that really sets you apart, things that other campuses don't have. We have one of the leading astrophysicists in the world. We're doing groundbreaking research in this field. Look at the results that our students are getting. And I think that's one of the key areas, is looking at what is happening to alumni, looking at what is happening to recent graduates, looking at how it's changing their lives. Purdue, I think, is doing an amazing job with this. All of their content that they put out is all student first, alumni first. It makes the attendee into the hero of the content. They actually transformed their marketing and communications team, is now their brand network team. So they are creating branded content, branded like video content, shorts, documentaries, all about the students that they have, all about the graduates, all about the alumni. And here is what we're producing and putting out into the world. Here's how we're making a difference. You could be part of this. So it's really trying to find that emotional connection, that human connection, showcasing that's what makes universities, colleges different from each other, are the people that are there. Faculty, staff, students, all of those aspects working together, along with opportunities that you create.
Yeah. And, to bring it back to content. So here's, for those that are watching the video version of this podcast, here's purdue.edu, which is, definitely from a content perspective, pretty oriented towards exactly what you just described, right? I mean, so yeah, we've got the photograph thing here. They've got a nice search bar. I haven't tested it to see if it works as well as Content Lion, but we'll see. But their content is right here, right? And I imagine this is some pretty nice rotating content. I've actually seen this boiler up video before because my son applied to Purdue. But yeah, then they've got Life at Purdue, and then it's more news and content, which looks like it's pretty recent. So yeah, their year in review is obviously a big piece here, and it's from December and it's January now. So yeah, definitely really current. When you look at something like this, what do you notice as someone who's a content marketer? What stands out to you just by taking a look at like the Purdue homepage, and what do you like about this, or what would you critique?
Yeah, I mean, I do a lot of content audits for brands and institutions, and it's really looking at the complete picture that they have. So, the homepage is a great landing page entryway into the organization, and it really is your opportunity to showcase the things that make you different, the results that you are going to get from, using those services, using those products. And I think once you start, like you've got some videos up here, if you start looking at their social content, if you start looking at their video content and how that all ties into the messaging, the brand, the look, the voice, the feel that they have, it underlines everything. So there is no confusion when you go to even the student, they have a Boilermaker Ambassadors program that students can go into. They've got a whole website, a whole Instagram page that's just student content. It all looks the same as all of their standard institutional content. It looks the same. It's the same messaging, the same voice that they have up on their YouTube videos. Their YouTube videos are really thoughtful, well-produced stories about students, about alumni, and they get millions of views. And they really do a good job of promoting student content, promoting alumni content through their social networks, featuring students, featuring faculty right on the front page of their websites. All of their news stories are really focused about results, about who's doing what. So I think that's really, higher ed is a interesting place to create content because higher ed tends to be very siloed. You have lots of different sections and segments across a university or a college campus that are doing very different things. You've got a lot of different audiences that you're trying to connect to. So figuring out how to blend those all together so that it is one university, one campus, one brand voice that comes across is really difficult to do. And I think Purdue has really done a good job of that. And that comes from, very intentional change management. It comes from having, leadership say, we are doing this. And everybody that's the frontline workers who are like, we understand why we're doing this and we're all going to get on board. And then they do have a content system that allows them to create repositories for templates so that everybody can go in and you don't have to go and create a new logo. You don't have to go and create a new newsletter template. You have stock ones that you can start with and adapt from there so that everything is consistent. You can see all the content that everybody else is creating. You have access to that. So you're not duplicating efforts across the different areas of the content community, the content landscape. And that really helps build trust with your audience. Audiences start to wonder if they come to your website and they go to a different school page and it's a completely different look with a completely different navigation. It starts to fragment in their minds. Is this all one organization or is this a bunch of different fragmented, house of brands versus a branded house? So I think Purdue does a really good job of really coalescing all of that in their content environment. And they think story first. They don't think channel first. Got it.
On a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate Purdue in terms of their content management execution?
Within higher ed, I would put them right up in a 9 or a 10 spot. I think higher ed tends to really be in general as a broad organization. I think higher ed tends to be very fragmented, doesn't have a lot of, hasn't had to do a lot of content strategy where everyone can just go and create content and put it out on their own. And they don't really think too much as an organization about how we're going to put our messaging out and how we're going to communicate this so that everybody understands it comes from, one institution, one voice, that we're all working together. I think higher ed tends to, every different department, every different school tends to see themselves as the most important because they're very focused on what they're doing. And there hasn't really been a lot of messaging intentionally around what we're putting out, what it's saying about us, how we're reaching our audiences. So I think that intentionality has really been a huge gap in higher ed. Up until the last few years, more and more organizations now are starting to look at content strategy and messaging. Marketing is becoming important now in higher ed. And I think it's going to, really quickly continue to expand until everyone realizes that, what we put out there, the content that we distribute into the environment, into the content landscape really matters.
Yeah. I want to contrast Purdue then against another big school. And I wanted to ask you for your opinion on Harvard. So don't know if you've been to the Harvard website, but I'm going to pop this up on screen. This is actually the very first homepage, harvard.edu. Today, it just has student research. And what I found amazing about this, by the way, I hadn't been to the Harvard website for years. I'm an alum. And I went there because they were in the news so much earlier this year. And I just went to the homepage and was shocked to see that all it is content. It's just straight content the whole way through with just different articles and videos. They don't even have the hey, here's where you apply, or here's the button, or student life, or any of that stuff. I mean, imagine it's up in the top right menu, but otherwise they just go straight content all the way down the page. And I'd be curious, is this too much? Or what are your thoughts on this? Because it's just a completely different website than any other higher ed website I've ever seen.
Yeah, and actually, I've done some work with Harvard. They are a very fragmented environment, and they do have a lot of different schools and institutions that aren't fully. I mean, they leverage the Harvard name and they use it extensively, but they're not fully bought into the one university principle. They're still very much promoting themselves. But I think it was about 5 years ago that Harvard experimented with this in focus solution, where instead of having like the standard boilerplate, we're Harvard, here's our homepage, come see what makes us so spectacular. They switched to this in focus feature where I think it was every month, they would have a new big feature that they would start off at the beginning of their homepage with. And it was like a big topic area, like, AI, or it was, social services, or it was different, like healthcare, really big topics. And that started driving. I mean, it's Harvard. They get a lot of traffic to their homepage, but they started seeing more engagement. They started seeing more people clicking through the homepage to go deeper into these specific stories. And so just within the last year or two, they decided to really lean into that and convert their entire homepage to this repository, this centralized news channel that is all about, what is Harvard doing and how does that impact what's going on in the world? How can we correlate those two different things? I think it's incredibly important that higher ed organizations start thinking about what they can do with their content to make them stand out. I think these, you see, and if your children are applying to college, you're going to see all sorts of different, brochures. You're going to get all sorts of different emails, and so much of it looks the same. So what can we do to stand out? And I think what Harvard is experimenting with is a great step forward. I think using your homepage to be the showpiece to drive people into your site in a deeper way is great. I also think from a search standpoint, from AI discoverability standpoint, I think what they're doing is brilliant because their homepage is constantly changing, constantly updating. It's creating links through to all these new different pages showing their expertise, their authoritativeness in all of these different areas. I think their in focus initiative was really a great step in that direction because they started building these pillar pages, these content pillars around a particular topic area, where then they would bring in links to all of the other content they have spread across their landscape to be able to connect all of those. So now, the search engines and the AI bots that come in will easily find that huge trove of content they have in a particular topic area. And they'll say, oh, we're going to elevate your content in our search results because you are an expert, you have authority, you've created a ton of content around this particular topic area. Whereas if it's spread all over your content network in, different subdomains and different subfolders, it's much more difficult for the bots to find those and kind of aggregate all of those as a, area of focus or area of expertise.
Got it. Well, there's a couple different things I want to ask you about this. One, I want to talk about the AI topic, which is, but before we jump into the AI topic around how to use AI with higher learning, there's also the concept of where does the return on investment come from? And Harvard's probably an unusual corner case, right? Because Harvard not only has to do all the things about, getting alumni and donors and all the things that every university has, but they also have to win a political battle because they're in the news and, their federal funding and lawsuits with the government. So let's put Harvard aside for a minute and let's go back to Purdue and let's talk about, where the ROI comes from. If you do content right, like Purdue does, right? If you're a 9 or a 10, what can a university or higher education expect to gain from doing it so well? What's the value there? Where's the return on investment?
Yeah, I mean, the primary, sources of income for higher ed are, enrollments and donors.
Yep.
So really focusing on admissions, really looking at, your advancement, your alumni network, and figuring out ways to strengthen your communications and to make yourself more discoverable to those areas. I think what Purdue is doing really elevates their brand awareness. They're putting out videos that are getting a lot of views because they're very emotional. They have a human connection. It shows those potential undergraduate students what they might attain if they connect themselves with that brand. And then on the other side, for the alumni side, it really looks at how do we build this into a community? How do we allow ourselves to continue to showcase the success of our alumni, but also what opportunities can we provide that bring our alumni together? Higher ed it's a long sales cycle, right? You're reaching out to high school students. You're looking for adult learners. You're looking for graduate students. So you've got a lot of different audiences that you're trying to connect with, and you're trying to lock them in for 4 years or 2 years of their life, depending on what they're doing. But you don't just want them to, apply and come to your school. You want to keep them engaged for the rest of their life. You want to build this community that they want to be a part of. And I think a lot of institutions don't think of their marketing from that perspective. They don't think of their content as a way to create that sense of community. I know Purdue offers all sorts of learning opportunities for alumni. They offer all sorts of networking opportunities where they'll bring them together in different groups. They'll do conferences just for their alumni, all sorts of virtual events, because they understand that when they engage with that network, when they continue to offer value for your lifetime, that changes the dynamic. So now you have all of these alumni who look to mentor the new undergraduate students that are coming in, and they can work with them directly. They can, show them what a day in the life looks like as, a physician or as an astronaut, or, all the different stories that they tell about their alumni. And I think that really helps create that network, that community that, are critical for higher ed, but so many higher ed institutions aren't thinking that way, and especially not thinking that way with how they're using their content and how they're employing the content that they're putting out there.
Got it. Do you have any examples of any higher education institutions who weren't doing a very good job at content, but then they really got their act together in content and started to see some outsized gains in terms of enrollment and the community that you're talking about? And I don't know if maybe the work that you do is classified and you can't talk about it, but if you could, I think it'd be really interesting to talk about an example like that.
Yeah, I mean, one of my favorite examples from a specific content marketing standpoint, Siena College is really, they have done an amazing job of leaning into content marketing. And it was probably, 7 or 8 years ago, they weren't doing, they were kind of doing the standard traditional marketing. And they really started looking into telling student stories and putting out information about, what is the university life like, and what is that college decision all about? A lot of the content they put out is not focused on their students. It's focused on the value of higher education. It's focused on what it takes, why you should select one school over another. They offer, I think every year they offer a free event to high school students just to help them figure out how to navigate the college acceptance, the college admissions process, how to figure out financial aid. And this is not for their students. This is for any high school student who wants to come and, they do classes for them. Here's how you fill out the FAFSA form. Here's how you fill out applications. Here's what your college essay should include. We don't care if you're going to come to Siena or not. We just want you to, have a better time navigating this whole college selection process and figuring out, how to get yourself into the right university for you.
Got it. Yeah. And I'm putting the the website up on the screen. And yeah, the message is really clear. The number one university in New York for getting a job. They've really got a message here about that. And then, it looks like they're trying to get people to see themselves as saints. And it looks like they've got a really interesting, by the way, they have one of the most interesting website like rollovers as I roll down this page, just the way that they transition from section to section. I don't know. There's some nice stuff that they do here, but very, very interesting. And so have these guys seen the ROI? Obviously you can't share things if you can't share things, but what would you say, either qualitatively or quantitatively, about how content marketing has changed Siena?
Yeah, it's had a massive impact. And I actually interviewed Allison Tercio, who leads marketing over there for my book. And she was saying that content marketing is the biggest driver of conversion traffic for new students, recruits coming into the university. Bigger than paid marketing that they're doing. So they're really leaning into content marketing, telling the student stories, showcasing like student fears when they come to campus and really humanizing that whole experience. And even the day that they have where they bring in high school students to learn about the whole process, they get about 1,000 students that come in to the campus. And a lot of those students, become interested in the campus because all the people that they have, all the volunteers they have there facilitating the event, know that this is an opportunity, not just to help these high school students, but to potentially get more, interested undergraduates.
Got it. And so now that we've established where the ROI comes from, let's talk about the big topic of the day, which is everybody's talking about AI. What are some of the specific things that are affecting higher education when it comes to AI and content marketing? Where do you see the changes, and what should higher education institutions really be scrambling to do in order to make sure they don't miss the boat here?
Yeah, I mean, when you talk about AI in higher ed, which is one of the reasons I left the university and went into this full time, is because AI is going to have a massive impact on higher ed, right? I mean, the teaching and learning side, obviously, it's going to change the way that we, engage in the classroom. But it's also going to change the way that we market. And I think there's a lot of talk in the higher ed landscape about personalization, right? Students are expecting personalized content more than just like, hello with your name at the top of an email.
Hello, Brian.
Right. They don't want to see that anyway. They want to see that, but they want a lot more than that. And I think AI can do such an incredible job of personalizing content, personalizing outreach, making it extremely relevant. One of the problems in higher ed is that higher ed tends to send out a lot of content, send out a lot of newsletters, a lot of posts, a lot of new content that all the different teams and departments and schools are all coming up with their own content and pushing that out there. It's really easy to muddle that entire message that's going out. If a potential student is getting 3 or 4 different emails from 3 or 4 different teams or departments, very confusing to figure out what really matters to them, and especially on an individual basis, because they may be getting emails about programs that they have no interest in. So I think AI and the ability to really personalize and hyper-focus that content for individual students with individual interests, and then create those opportunities for real human connections that are informed. So instead of just going to meet your advisor for the first time and you spend the first half of your meeting with them just trying to figure out who you are and what you're interested in, all of that data could be coming through from all the different forms they've filled out, from all the different information you've gathered about them, so that you can really spend that time forming that human connection, and not having to spend all that time trying to just familiarize yourself with that individual student. So I think
that reminds me of a story, because I have a 16-year-old daughter, and she does really, really well in school. And she got a postcard from, and I don't mean to be pejorative, but it's not any brand name school you'd recognize, right? Like not Hollywood upstairs medical school, but which is a Simpsons reference, but like something random. And you would have thought that it was a letter of, like the Medal of Honor that she was given, because she was like, oh my God, somebody wants me, like there's a school out there and they know my name and they want me, right? They just sent me something. So, she collected this postcard. She read the thing from front to back. I mean, everything that a content marketer would dream, like read everything, kid, don't just read the subheads, read all the copy, read the call to action, and she studied it. And I was just shocked at and I'm like, kid, Hollywood upstairs medical school is not where you're headed. Like that's not the place for you. You're going to do better than that. But and then I started thinking back to when I was 16, and it's not like you're brimming with confidence when you're 16, right? And so just knowing that somebody wants you is an amazing feeling when you're that age. And to your point about personalization and AI, I can only imagine the power of saying, hey, kid who goes to X high school, who just got an A in such and such class or whatever kind of information, who's on the such and such team, we want you. It's like, wait a minute, you do? Like, all that about me and you want me? Like, that's just got to be like, people who figure that out are going to have such at least for a while until they get jaded, an amazing ability to really reach these students. And so, yeah, I thought that it was definitely an interesting piece. So I guess then the question becomes on personalization. What do you think is like the realistic stuff that people can do in 26 that will be personalization with AI, and what's probably science fiction, at least for the next 90 days? As the world's changing so fast.
Yeah, I mean, so much of that depends on your content governance and data governance, where you store your data and how you can access it, and where your content, like how scattered your content is and how focused your content is. A lot of people look at AI as the solution, but if you have bad data governance and bad content governance, AI is not going to help with those processes. You're not going to be able to personalize emails to your potential students if you can't connect your CRM data to your email, platform, or, if you can't look at the content in your landscape to know what you should be recommending to them based on their interests. So I think making sure that your content is, using schema markup, using structured data, tagging things so that it's obvious, like when you've got a high school student who's on the chemistry club and interested in chemistry, how do you connect that to, well, here's our success stories that we've put out about our graduates in chemistry, or here's the faculty that we have and the research that they've done in this area, in this field. You might be interested in this. Here are programs specifically tailored to what your other interests are. You could join our, ultimate Frisbee team and be doing chemistry on the side. And here's how those overlap within our environment. So having that connection between your data and your content, and having everything tagged and marked up so that you can easily deliver those personalized results, I think are huge. If there are already systems, there are already schools out there that are doing this. The technology is already available. If you lean into these sort of content delivery platforms, if you lean into like AI-powered CRM tools, if you set up systems, if you create resources and, staff who can manage these sort of connections, who can use different AI tools to build these solutions, I think that's where you're really going to, set yourself apart from all those kind of generic responses that you get, all that, you're talking about how excited your daughter was to get that postcard, and that mail, after probably the seventh or eighth university that sent that mail to her, she's like, oh, all right, another one of these. My kids are, in college already, and they're still getting, mail from different organizations. So.
Yeah, that's just such a shame to that one. Yeah, the efforts there, and yeah, that's just due to dirty data, right? And right. I remember actually that you just made me think of this story. I remember there was a pretty prominent university that somehow got the G in my last name converted to an A. I don't know if it was just a typo or maybe it was my sloppy penmanship on something, but they kept referring me as David Ewing. And I was like, the spell is broken. Like, right? I'm not David Ewing. And so no matter how much I corrected it, it didn't work. But that was a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. But yeah. But Brian, we could talk all day about this, and I know that we could, but just in the interest of time, I'm gonna probably say that we're gonna wrap here. But I do have one fun question for you about some of your personal hobbies, and I want to know what the connection is. So, we actually first bonded over hobbies, right? As we were sitting there over dinner, you told me about being a skydiver and even like a competitive skydiver, which sounds amazing, right? Plus rock climbing, plus snowboarding. I'm curious, like, how do you, as a professional marketing yourself, using your own content, how do you leverage your hobbies and your personal interest and still keep things professional? What do you do with that in order to kind of set yourself apart, if anything? And what advice would you have for other people who might have interesting personal things that are trying to then, use that to get into, some of their, to their business audience and use that content the right way?
Yeah. I mean, we were talking about differentiation for clients. I think that's super important for content creators as well. I've been doing a weekly newsletter for over 3 years now. And when I first started out, I was really kind of focused on, how can I add value? Where can I, answer questions, solve problems for my audience? And then as I talked with more and more people, I had a speaking coach and I was talking with him about some of my hobbies. He was like, lean into that. That sets you apart. That makes you different. You have a different perspective on things. So then I kind of switched my newsletter to be like in 2 sections. The first section was, some different adventure or some different aspect of these different, extreme sports that I'm involved in. And then how that relates to content marketing or AI integration. And there's so many crossovers when you start thinking about it. And so now I get a lot of feedback from people. We're like, oh, I really liked your skydiving intro or your rock climbing intro and how you connected that then to, what's going on in the AI landscape. And it's interesting. It just gets people to start thinking about what is happening in their everyday life that then connects to the work that they're doing or how they're trying to process something. I mean, even as a parent, trying to deal with, giving your kids direction and, pushing them in a certain, trying to get them to focus on a certain thing. It's the same thing that you do with a client when they're trying to, come up with a new marketing plan. You've got to figure out how to guide them, how to give them direction without saying, this is what you need to do, because they're not going to listen to you at that point,
Yeah. I mean, there's got to be some natural crossover between jumping out of a perfectly good airplane and preparing for a product launch. Like those have to be
for sure,
equally terrifying things, at least in my book. So great. Well, Brian, thank you so much for being on Content Kingdom. If people want to learn more about you, especially if they're our higher ed audience who's like, wow, we got to talk to Brian and we need to get some thoughts from him, whether it's that or anybody else, where do they go to find you?
You can find me at brianwpiper.com and Brian W. Piper on almost every social platform.
All right. And what does the W stand for?
William.
All right. Brian.
There's a
W.
lot of
Piper.
Brian Pipers out there. So you can differentiate.
There's a lot of David Ewings, which is why, I go with the David G. Ewing. So davidgewing.com for me. But Brian W. Piper, that's where you go to find him. Brian, thank you so much for being on the show. And we'll see you all next time. Drones. Love them or hate them?
Love them.
Really? Why?
The opportunities to get much better video. We've been experimenting with different drones. There are actually drones you can get that will follow you in free fall.
What? Favorite book, childhood books count?
Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance.
Ooh, spicy choice.
In college as a philosophy student, and it was at the right time, the right book for me, and changed my perspective.
Favorite social media platform?
LinkedIn.
Favorite guilty pleasure?
Chocolate, probably. Big chocolate guy. Chocolate everything. Cover anything in chocolate, it's better.
Your favorite movie?
Princess Bride.
Inconceivable.
I don't think you understand what that word means.
Nice. Your favorite quote?
Do something every day that scares you.